Hello, everyone. Caleb here, and welcome back to another episode of Absolute Falcon Cinema. It's great to be here, and I am here to discuss all things Quentin Tarantino. Now, in case y'all aren't familiar, Quentin Tarantino is a world famous director at this point who has directed many films that have become cinematic icons in the medium. And today, I wanted to go over the list of his top 20 greatest movies of all time, according to his own words. He revealed his top 20 on the Bret Easton Ellis podcast, and I'm going to be going over them, and I'm not necessarily reacting to them, but just providing my own thoughts on the whole thing. So, yeah, without further ado, let's jump right into the list. These are what he considers some of the best films of the 21st century. And he picked all of movies that came out in the 2000s, between 2000 and 2025. And this is his list. Starting with number 20, he chose West Side Story, which is Steven Spielberg's second to most recent film. And it is based off of an old Broadway musical from the 50s. And it is starring Ansel Elgort, and I think it's nearly 2.5 hours long. In Tarantino's own words, this is one where Steven shows he still has it. I don't think Scorsese has made a film this exciting this century. It revitalized him. I couldn't believe I liked the lead Ansel Elgort, as I didn't like him in anything else. Well, Tarantino, obviously you haven't seen Baby Driver. Ansel Elgort is also the star in that film, and that is a 10 out of 10 movie. And Ansel Elgort, adds so much to the movie. He doesn't have to say a lot throughout the film. It's the expressions in his face that he makes that is really the backbone of his whole performance. And yeah, sure, I can see why he's so impressive in this movie. While I haven't seen it, I have heard that the dance scenes are really impressive technically and visually. So I can see why this is a great pick. I personally don't even think it's his best film that he has made in the 21st century, though. I'm gonna be honest, picking this over a film like Catch Me If You Can, which came out in 2006, or The Fabelmans, which is his most recent movie, which came out in 2022. Catch Me If You Can is just a really great heist movie that takes place in the 60s about a con man who basically steals millions of dollars from airports, and he gets all these fake jobs and stuff, or he gets all these jobs posing as a professional in that job, and that's how he's able to steal all that money. And he's played by Leonardo DiCaprio, which Leonardo DiCaprio is such a great actor, so he delivers an insane performance. And Tom Hanks is the detective chasing him, also one of the greatest actors of our time. And that duo is just so great in that movie, and it's just such an entertaining movie to watch in general. While The Fabelmans is basically Spielberg's love letter to why he got into movies. And the story of that is loosely based on his childhood and how he got into film in general. It's a movie that really conveys the love of making movies in such a remarkable way. I gave that a 10 out of 10 when I first watched it. I thought it was a really cool movie. It looks really unique visually. It kind of looks like something out of a dream, the way that Spielberg films it, and all of the actors are just really great. But Paul Dano is in The Fabelmans, and we'll get to Paul Dano a little bit later. Tarantino has some words for him. But moving on to number 19, which he put as Cabin Fever. It's directed by Eli Roth, and it's a horror movie. I don't know a whole lot about it, but in Tarantino's own words, there's something so charming. Eli's sense of humor, sense of gore, it just really, really works. People kind of forget how tense it is in the first half because it gets so genuinely funny in the last 20 minutes. Hostel might be his best movie, but this is my favorite. Okay, sure. I haven't really seen the movie, so I can't really give an honest opinion about it. But I've heard of Eli Roth loosely. I heard he's a great horror movie director. Um, I mean, this might be Tarantino's like sense of gore and stuff, but I don't know. Like choosing this modern horror movie over like a movie like Nope, or I think no, the first Scream came out in the '90s. But all of Jordan Peele's most recent horror movies, I would rather put that on this list because Jordan Peele has really made waves in the horror industry for being like such a talented director working in such a really neat genre, and like it's really ironic because Jordan Peele was a comedian. He's a comedian, and you probably know him from like the Key and Peele sketches, but Jordan Peele's movies are some of like the scariest movies I've ever seen. So it's just the tonal shift. I think that makes it sort of ironic, but it doesn't really detract from the quality of his movies. They're still like all really well made movies with some incredible acting and some excellent cinematography. So I I'm surprised and none of his films made it to this list, but this random movie that I've never heard about has. So I maybe it's just because I am not a true cinephile like Tarantino is, or I haven't made any movies before, so I don't really have the same appreciation as he has. But that's my two cents on that pick. Next up, number 18, he chose Moneyball, which is a Bennett Miller film starring Brad Pitt. And I know this movie particularly for the Aaron Sorkin screenplay. I've read a couple of Aaron Sorkin screenplays, and he is known for having really like snappy dialogue, and that's why he's one of the most like well-known screenwriters of our time. He is just a really phenomenal writer because of the way he writes his characters in like his own unique style. And in Tarantino's own words, Brad Pitt's performance is one of my favorite star performances of the last 20 years, where a movie star came in and reminded you why he was a movie star and just carried the whole movie on his shoulders. Yeah, I suppose that's true. Brad Pitt is a very talented actor, for sure. Although I would say that his performance in Ocean's 11, I think, is more impressive than this. Like, I see, I say all this stuff like just off the top of my head when in reality I haven't seen the movie, so that makes me a little bit hypocritical. But Brad Pitt's performances, I'm not very familiar with because I haven't seen a whole lot of Brad Pitt movies, but I think a movie that I would put here instead is like Ocean's 11. Brad Pitt stars with George Clooney in that movie, and he is just like so phenomenal. Like the two like pair so well together. Like their pairing in that movie is just so iconic that I like putting like a movie like Moneyball above that. I think is it's a choice. It's a choice. I guess I can't really put say a whole lot about the movie itself, but I would put Ocean's 11 instead because that's the Brad Pitt performance I tend to remember a little bit better than all of his other ones. Number 17 is a movie called Chocolate, directed by Prachia Pinkow. I hope I didn't mispronounce that. But here's a movie you've probably never heard of. People getting up in the most spectacular of ways. They trained this 12-year-old girl for 4 years to star in this movie. This is some of the greatest kung fu fights I've ever seen in a movie. Oh, that's interesting. I have never heard of it before. But that does sound really interesting. 12-year-old girl for 4 years? That's insane. Especially for like a movie. Like child acting is never is a topic that's kind of got like a mixed bag for most people just cuz the expertise of the actors is sometimes brought into question. But I can see why this movie is really appealing, especially for a guy like Tarantino who has directed the Kill Bill movies, and he has really done. I mean, he's really he's a big like kung fu movie guy. It seems like so. I can see why this movie would be so good. It came in 2008. As far as like martial arts movies go, I haven't really seen a whole lot of them, The only one I can really think of is like The Matrix. The Matrix has a lot of really great martial arts fighting, or like Kung Fu Panda. Like it's not a real martial arts movie, but it's a good animated movies nonetheless. So I don't really have a pick that would replace it, just because like I've never heard of this movie before, and I don't really know what it's about, so I can't really give my own judgment on it. But interesting choice, interesting like niche choice. Number 16 is The Devil's Rejects, directed by Rob Zombie. This is the second installment in a trilogy. Ah, I always forget what the other two movies in that trilogy are, but Rejects is known to be like the best of that trilogy. In Tarantino's words, this rough Peckinpah cowboy Manson thing, that voice didn't really exist before our House of a Thousand Corpses, and he refined that voice with this movie. Peckinpah wasn't part of horror before this. He melded it with sick hillbillies, and it's become a thing now. You can recognize it across the street, but that didn't exist before. Oh, interesting. So it's more of like the culture surrounding this movie that makes it so impactful. I see. I run into this problem with these movies a lot where I just don't really know a whole lot about them. Devil's Rejects, I've heard, is like a really great slasher movie. And yeah, House of a Thousand Corpses is the first installment in that trilogy. And I think the whole premise of it is just, the, actually, never mind. I don't really know the whole premise of it because I haven't seen a single Rob Zombie film. But I don't really see the appeal of slashers. Don't attack me. Don't attack me. I really like movies like Scream and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but those like classics sort of have legacies of their own where they are not only slashers but also just like really well made movies that subvert or either pioneer or subvert the expectations of that genre. So that's really the only entry point I've had into slasher movies. I really could have gotten into more slashers over Halloween, but I was just really slacking off. So it's a it's a good I would say it's a very respectable pick for like best slasher of the 21st century because I don't really know a whole lot of slashers that came out in the 21st century. I know mostly like 20th century slashers, but this movie has a good enough reputation where it's like you can say that, and I would respect it. Next up, number 15 is The Passion of the Christ, which is a Mel Gibson movie. This this movie is famous for how violent it is in the depiction of Jesus' death, and Tarantino makes it very apparent. I was laughing a lot during the movie, not because we were trying to be perverse, laughing at Jesus getting up. Extreme violence is just funny to me, and when you go so far beyond extremity, it just gets funnier and funnier. We were just groaning and laughing at how up this was. Mel did a tremendous directorial job. He put me in that time period. I talked to Mel Gibson about this, and he looked at me like I was a nut. Yeah, you kind of are a nut, Quentin Tarantino, because I don't understand your obsession with gore and violence, like how funny it is. Like there's got to be something messed up in your mind if you think it's that funny. But yes, the extreme violence in this movie, while I haven't seen it, like it sort of solidifies this movie's like reputation. A lot of Christians were not a big fan of this movie because of how uh grotesque the whole thing was. But yeah, I don't really have an opinion on this, other than Mel Gibson is an awful person. So I mean, you sort of bringing him up and like talking to him is kind of like, oh, okay, so that's where you stand. Like, you're hanging out with all those people. Okay, okay. Number 14 is School of Rock. It is a Richard Linklater movie starring Jack Black, and I'm sure many of y'all are familiar with this. This was kind of a movie that is nostalgic to a lot of people. It came out in the early 2000s, and Quentin Tarantino says it was a really fun time at the theaters. It was real fun screening. I do think this one had the explosion of Jack Black combined with Rick Linklater and Mike White. That made it special. This is as close to Bad News Bears as we ever got. I School of Rock is a classic in many ways. It's such a funny movie. Jack Black basically directing this like school band, or not even the school band, this the classroom of kids to be in this like rock band, and it's such a fun film to watch. It it's not like it goes off the rails like other Jack Black movies. Richard Linklater manages to keep it really tight, and the comedy in this movie ages super well, and the whole thing is Jack Black is just such a funny guy, and he makes this movie all the more better as well. So this is a really, I would say, this is a really respectable pick. I think this is the first movie out of all of the movies on his list that I have actually seen before. But I I can confidently say that yeah, this is a pretty good pick for top 20 best movies. Number 13 is Jackass the movie. Oh my gosh, what are we doing? What are we doing, Tarantino? This was the movie I laughed at the most from these last 20 years. I don't remember laughing from the beginning to end like this since Richard Pryor. As I was making Kill Bill, I thought this movie was so funny I had to show it to the crew. So we found a print, watched the movie, and just died. Yeah, and I can see why Jackass is a funny movie to a man like Tarantino. In case y'all don't know, Jackass is a series of uh there's this comedy series surrounding people that just do dumb stunts like the whole time, and I can see why it could be funny to a guy like Tarantino. Me personally, like that movie's funnier than like something like School of Rock or something. I think one of the funniest movies I have ever seen is 10 Things I Hate About You. That movie is just hilarious, and I don't I don't really I don't think it came out in the 2000s, though. I think it was a little bit earlier than that. But picking that for like your funniest movie, like I understand Tarantino sense of humor could appeal to a movie like Jackass. As far as like funniest movies I've seen though, like I mean Night at the Museum is another like really good one. Um Funny movies in the 20th century, I tend to lean a little bit more towards like old style humor. So a lot of like 60s shows like the Carol Burnett show, and some 70s shows like Monty Python, The Holy Grail I would credit as the funniest movie I've ever seen. So the selection here, I mean, it's not really my sense of humor, but Tarantino's sense of humor. If it works for him, then sure. Number 12, Big Bad Wolves, directed by Aaron Cashalis. I haven't heard of this one before, but Tarantino says, this has got a fantastic script and a similar storyline to Prisoners. They handle it with guts and balls. You know the American movie wouldn't do that. Well, for one, Prisoners is such a well-regarded film for its like really fantastic performances, and I can see why like the like indie movie is better than the American like Hollywood one, just because they're allowed to go a little bit more off the rails. But yeah, this I guess this is just like a different country's interpretation of prisoners. And I guess I don't really have a whole lot to say about this movie because I haven't seen Prisoners or Big Bad Wolves. So sure thing, Quentin. Okay, number 11 is Battle Royale, directed by Kinji Fukasaku. And Tarantino, I think, went viral over this pick for his movie because he says, I do not understand how the Japanese writer didn't sue Hunger Games author Suzanne Collins for every thing she owns. They just ripped off the book. Stupid book critics are not going to go watch a Japanese movie called Battle Royale, so the stupid book critics never called her on it. They talked about how it's the most original thing they ever read. As soon as the film critics saw the film, they said, what the This is just Battle Royale except PG. Yeah, I mean, I've read Hunger Games, and I've heard of Battle Royale, and it's got a legacy of being basically like the OG Hunger Games. But I mean, even then, this idea of like pitting kids against each other, it's while Battle Royale was the first to do it on film, I would actually argue that Stephen King did it first with The Long Walk, and that whole book is basically just group of kids like or a group of kids competing in like a government event, and like Stephen King was the first that I'm aware of to really develop that idea. So whether Suzanne Collins got that idea from Battle Royale or The Long Walk is debatable, but interesting pick. I've heard great things about this movie. I should probably check it out at some point. Number 10 is Midnight in Paris, which is directed by Woody Allen. This movie is starring Owen Wilson, and Tarantino has a lot of strong feelings about Owen Wilson. I really can't stand Owen Wilson. I spent the first time watching the movie loving it and hating him. The second time I watched it, I was like, okay, don't be such a prick. He's not so bad. Then the third time I watched it, I found myself only watching him. Okay, interesting choice if you're not a big Owen Wilson fan. Midnight in Paris is a rom com, and I don't really know a whole lot about it, but Owen Wilson as an actor, sure, I can see why he is a bit more divisive, but you would pick this one like a movie like Midnight in Paris over something like any like Wes Anderson movie. Like Owen Wilson is in the majority of Wes Anderson movies, and I think his performance in animated movies, especially like Cars and Fantastic Mr. Fox, is like I think I might be a little biased since I grew up with Cars, but I think I kind of prefer his performances in those movies over like live action movies that he's done, you know? So I personally, instead of Midnight in Paris, I would just put Fantastic Mr. Fox here because I mean, honestly, come on. Who is rewatching like Midnight in Paris like over and over again in the same capacity that people are revisiting Fantastic Mr. Fox? Like that movie alone has such a massive impact to cinephiles and just like animation in general that it's like I think that should go here instead of Midnight in Paris. Even though I haven't seen Midnight in Paris, it's like, really? You'd put that over Fantastic Mr. Fox? I guess that's just what comes up in my mind. All right, I should. Shaun of the Dead is number 9, directed by Edgar Wright. This is one of the blind spots I've had in Edgar Wright's filmography. I haven't really checked out his trilogy that he did with Simon Pegg. I've heard it's really good, though. Quentin Tarantino says, my favorite directorial debut, even though he did a cheapy debut movie he doesn't like to talk about. I loved how much he loved the Romero universe he recreated. The script is really fantastic. It's one of the most quotable films on this list. I still quote the line, "The dogs don't look up." It's not a spoof of zombie movies, it's a real zombie movie, and I appreciate the distinction. Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot to say about this movie because I love Edgar Wright's movies. I haven't checked out the trilogy of movies he made with Simon Pegg, so I can't really say a whole lot about it. But I've heard they're really really good. So putting this Edgar Wright movie on the list is respectable. I think an Edgar Wright movie should at least be on the list of like top 20 best movies of the 21st century because Edgar Wright as a director has such a impactful style of filmmaking that like he's a really hard director to just like ignore on your lists. So yeah, good pick. Number 8 is Mad Max Fury Road, directed by George Miller, starring Tom Hardy. I'm sure y'all know how much I love Mad Max Fury Road. I think it should be higher on this list. I think it should be in the top 5 at least. But Tarantino says, I was actually not going to see it for the simple reason that in a world where Mel Gibson exists and he's not playing Max, I want Mad Mel. Weeks and weeks and weeks passed, and my people kept talking about how great it was. And Fred, my editor, was saying, I'm serious, you gotta do it. And then I saw it. The great stuff is so great, and you're watching a truly great filmmaker. He had all the money in the world and all the time in the world to make it exactly as he wanted. That is a severe understatement of how amazing this movie is. I'm telling y'all, this is one of, if not the greatest action movies ever made. So yes, not only is the editing really great, I'm sure the editor, his editor Fred, pointed that out because of that. It's just the set design is so cool. The practical effects are incredible. The acting is so good. The camera composition, in case y'all don't know, Mad Max Fury Road was actually shot in a really special way where the camera is meant to follow the action along with your eyes. So in the movie, there's a lot of rapid cuts, but you never really get lost in the sauce because the camera keeps moving in a way that your eyes follow the action so seamlessly. And honestly, I could go on and on about how great Mad Max Fury Road is, but great pick that you would put it here, Tarantino. I just wish you'd put it a little bit higher. Number 7 is Unstoppable, directed by Tony Scott. This was actually Tony Scott's last film. Tony Scott also directed the Top Gun movie, the first one at least. So I'm not very familiar with his work. Top Gun is the only movie I've seen of his, and I was not a big fan of that movie. But Unstoppable is a monster movie, and Tarantino says, "It's one of my favorite last movies of a director. I've seen it 4 times, and every time I see it, I like it more. If you asked me years ago, I would have put Man on Fire on the list, but Unstoppable is one of the purest visions of Tony's action aesthetic, and the two guys are great together, and it gets better and better. It's one of the best monster movies of the 21st century. The train is a monster, and the train becomes a monster. It becomes one of the greatest monsters of our time, stronger than Godzilla, stronger than those King Kong movies." Interesting. So he described this as a monster movie. And while I'm not familiar with the movie itself, I can give my 2 cents on monster movies. Godzilla is a franchise I am like partially familiar with. I went and saw -1 a couple years ago. And honestly, like, you're putting this Tony Scott movie over Godzilla -1, which is, I think, one of the greatest monster movies ever made, just because the script is incredible, the acting is really great, and the visual effects were made on a budget of only like around $10 million, which for visual effects, which for like CGI and stuff, that is like super cheap, and they look phenomenal. I think it won best visual effects at the Oscars, and it was like a well earned win. I think that should go here instead. Number 6 is Zodiac, directed by David Fincher. This is like his crime thriller epic about the real life Zodiac killer. When I first watched Zodiac, I wasn't that into it. And then it started playing on the movie channels. And the first thing I knew, watching 20 minutes of it, 40 minutes of it, and I realized this is a lot more engaging than I remember it being. And it kept grabbing me in different sections. So I decided to watch this goddamn thing again. And it was the whole different experience from that point on. I found myself every 6 or 7 years watching it again. And it's a luxurious experience that I give myself over to. Mesmerizing masterwork. Yeah, I've heard great things about this movie. Again, it's a point in this whole podcast where it's like it's a movie I have unfortunately missed out on, so I can't really give a whole lot of judgment on the thing itself. But the charisma of the lead actors, Mark Ruffalo and Jake Gyllenhaal, cannot be understated, especially in their earlier films. So, and Robert Downey Jr. is also in it too, and Robert Downey Jr. is an incredible actor. So the whole like way the movie plays out is somewhat unknown to me, but I can recognize the strength of those actors and the strength of David Fincher as a director. I think his direction is like really unique from other directors in the way that it's a bit darker, a bit slower, but it is nonetheless very gripping. Number 5 is There Will Be Blood by Paul Thomas Anderson. I This is one of Paul Thomas Anderson movies I have also missed out on, but it's got a reputation like no other film on this list. It is starring Daniel Day-Lewis, and he is an incredible actor, and this is considered to be like his best performance, in Tarantino's words. Daniel Day-Lewis, the old style craftsmanship quality to the film. It had an old Hollywood craftsmanship without trying to be like that. It was the only film he's ever done, and I brought it up to him, that doesn't have a set piece. The fire is the closest to a set piece. This was a story about dealing with the narrative, dealing with the story, and he did it amazingly. There Will Be Blood would have stood a good chance at being number 1 or number 2 if it didn't have a big, giant flaw in it, and that flaw is Paul Dano. Obviously, it's supposed to be a two-hander, but it's also drastically obvious that it's not a two-hander. Dano is weak sauce, man. He is the weak sister. Austin Butler would have been wonderful in that role. He's just such a weak, uninteresting guy. The weakest actor in SAG. Okay, that is some really serious Paul Dano slander that Tarantino got a lot of heat for in on social media. And the overall reception to this was, "What are you talking about? Like, the are you talking about, man?" Paul Dano is such an underrated actor in the way that he has such a unique persona throughout his whole movie or throughout his entire filmography. His role, I think most prominently his role in The Batman, where he is the Riddler, and he just has such a power over the film. The way his like sudden like outbursts are just so like creepy, and the way that he approaches like Batman in prison and that whole scene, I think is such a testament to Dano's like expertise in the medium, and just to outright just like slander him like that is such a wild move from Tarantino. I think Tarantino really comes off to me as like a film snob. Like, he has the talent and he makes some great movies, but his opinions are just so apathetic to the actual creators behind these movies. So I think a lot can be said about like his whole filmography and how much you're willing to separate the art from the artist, because he comes off in a lot of these interviews as kind of like a dick. I Tarantino, if you're actually listening to this, which I there's no way that you are. No offense, but you got to tone it down a little bit, man. Like, you're not the smartest guy in the room. You aren't like, you might have created the most movies out of everybody in the room, but you can't talk down on filmmakers that put their life work into films like that. I think that you should give filmmakers more grace and room to grow, besides like, other than just giving Paul Dano just the thumbs down like right out of the bat. Like, when this is only one movie out of all of his films that he's done, and I've seen multiple movies with Paul Dano in it, and he is incredible in like all of them. So this is really low hanging fruit, which I'm kind of going off on, but I think that Tarantino, come on, man, you gotta tone it down a little bit. All right, I am going to speed things up a little bit, and just kind of go over the top five real quickly. Dunkirk is number four, which is one of Christopher Nolan's most recent movies. Lost in Translation is number three, and it's directed by Sofia Coppola. It's got Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson in it. And Toy Story 3, number two, which is one of the most amazing Pixar films. And Black Hawk Down is his number one pick, directed by Ridley Scott, and it's one of Josh Hartnett's actual debut roles. Josh Hartnett is a really famous actor right now. You may know him from the most previous M. Night Shyamalan movie, or the most recent M. Night Shyamalan movie, Trap. But I'm going to go over this top four. Dunkirk is an interesting choice. It's a really well-made movie, a really well-made war movie. I don't really think it's Christopher Nolan's best, though. I think, like, having this here and not a movie like Inception or Oppenheimer or even Interstellar, like, I think those movies are so much better technically and visually than Dunkirk that it's like, I can see why this could appeal to a guy like Tarantino, expecting a tighter, more action-packed sort of thing, or more about like building tension. Dunkirk is really great at building tension, so I can see why he would put this on here. Lost in Translation, I can't form much of opinion because I don't really know Sofia Coppola's filmography, but he describes this as a girly movie, which is interesting. I feel like most people I know that have seen this movie aren't very like girly. Anyways, Toy Story 3. Yeah, this is a great pick. Toy Story 3, I think, is my favorite in the Toy Story trilogy as well, and is a really good contender for Best Pixar movie. Like, it's really emotional and really great. He compares this to like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly of the franchise. So, like, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is the third installment of a sequel, and I think that the whole like ending to a trilogy, like how it closes off, is like really remarkable. And Black Hawk Down, interesting choice. I haven't seen it again, so I can't really make a much of a opinion for it. But Black Hawk Down is a war movie, and I don't really care much for those, so that might just be why I haven't seen it. But Josh Hartnett is a remarkable actor, and yeah, that was some Absolute Falcon cinema and my basically analysis of Tarantino's whole filmography. And I hope y'all enjoyed listening to it. I hope my Tarantino impression wasn't too bad. I actually thought it was really good. But thanks for tuning in. I have been Caleb, your host. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Take care.